as far as positions go and what the Spurs will be looking to draft, how can they maximize Wemby to their best abilities?
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the interesting things with this draft for the Spurs having two picks, the question is, who are the two guys that fit together best with him, or what is the way to like maximize the value, whether it's via trade or something else of these picks. I think with Victor, one of the great things about him as a prospect is, or I guess now no longer a prospect, as a guy who's going to be an all-star in the not too far future. His versatility, being skilled, having the size to play multiple positions, the cover that he gives you defensively, you can do a lot of different things. So I think the biggest thing will be continuing to have good spacing around him. You want to be able to give him space to operate. You want to put shooters on the floor to let him, if you double team him, he can pass over the double team, like to maximize that. And defensively, he can cover for guys who are not as good of defenders, just having him out there. So where they land in this draft, where there's a lot of guys who are very different skill sets, I think will be interesting to see.
Yeah, so with that, I mean, with what top prospects are available, who do you see the Spurs potentially targeting come time for the draft at 4 and 8, if all goes according to plan and they keep those picks?
Yeah, well, some of the names that I think we've been hearing for San Antonio, I would keep an eye on Reed Shepherd from Kentucky. I think if he is there at number 4, I think he'd be a strong option for them and high on their list at that spot. A very good shooter, room to grow as a point guard, very consistent in terms of his focus and competitiveness, and I think gets the most out of his tools defensively as a smaller guard. More names to keep an eye on. I would keep an eye on Stefan Castle from UConn. Bigger defensive-minded guard, room to grow on offense, room to grow as a playmaker, and gives you sort of the type of size and switchability on the perimeter that's very, very valuable in the NBA if he can kind of get his shot up to speed. And other names further down, I would keep an eye on Devin Carter from Providence, another tough, competitive defender, defensive guard who can score, and Tidjane Saloun from France, who another French player who gives you versatility and is a little bit further off from contributing, but a guy who Victor knows, and I think who would be an interesting fit if they go that route, giving them the more athleticism and shooting potentially in the front court.
So from what you've heard with rumors, with who the Spurs have been linked to, how much of it do you think is misdirection intentionally, players that the Spurs really are interested in, or just simply rumors that came about?
Yeah, well, this time of year, it's like a big game of telephone around the NBA. Everyone's calling each other. Everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. People are trying to connect the dots behind the scenes. I do think that in the case of the Spurs, I think it's true that they have interest in a lot of different players. I think they've had to prepare for a lot of different scenarios, having 2 picks in the top 10. And there is a good amount of trade interest in both their picks. So they're going to have options depending on how it goes, right? But they're factors they can't control. But I do think that there is real interest in a lot of guys from them. And it's just a matter of, in what order do they prefer them? And, at what point would you rather trade than pick? And that's the type of thing that I think only they know. That's the type of thing that stays internal. So I do think there's some truth to some of the names that are out there, but who they're going to land with depends on a lot of factors.
What are your thoughts on them trading up with their 4 and 8 to potentially get a top pick, or using those picks as leverage in free agency? What are your thoughts on those two scenarios?
Yeah, I think there's at least been, I'm sure they've looked at that possibility of trading up to number 1. I think the nature of this year's draft, which is the perception is that it's a little bit weaker at the top. There's not a lot separating, the guy you might take at 1 and the guy you might get at 4 or 7. So sort of from that standpoint, if you think that's true, and there's no one who's like the true guy, right? There's no Wembanyama, there's no Zion Williamson, there's no one who's the obvious like shoe in, don't think about it, that's who we're taking. So from that perspective, I think it's appealing to maybe have more than one swing at it, right? Like to get 1 or 2 prospects who you're comfortable with rather than consolidating to go up. But I do think also that there are going to be options for them to trade back, and I do think they want to be competitive in the not too far future. With a talent like Wembanyama there. So if there's opportunities to use these picks to either upgrade the roster or with veterans, or to find uh, value through other means, whether a team is gonna give you future picks or whatnot to move up, I think you have to think about it. So what direction they go here, I think is a lot of people in the NBA are curious and trying to figure that out right now.
Are the Spurs the most interesting team in this year's draft as far as all the draft capital they have and what they could do with it, with having a generational talent to build around?
Yeah, I do think they're a team that kind of holds the keys sort of to how the lottery is going to go. Whether they decide to make moves, what direction they go. All the teams picking behind them right now are trying to figure out what San Antonio is doing. I also think the Spurs have become a place where a lot of players would like to play. Getting to play with a guy like Wembanyama, who is, a generational player who makes other guys better. He's easy to play with in a lot of different ways. I think players and agents, I think, have interest in coming to San Antonio right now to play with him. So I think they're in a good spot, whichever direction they go, building this out, and being able to stay flexible while doing so, I think is going to be important as well.
My last question, because I'm sure by the time you might be ready to wrap up, but as far as diving in a little bit deeper with Reed Shepherd and Stephon Castle, as you lead up to the draft, can you just kind of share more about them and what is really interesting about their games and how that could benefit the Spurs?
Yeah. A lot of teams view Reed Shepherd as the top point guard prospect in this draft. I think the way that he shot it at Kentucky, despite coming off the bench, but made a very big impact in the minutes that he got. I think teams value what he brings in terms of his consistency, his leadership, his toughness. These are all things that are appealing. And even though he's a little bit smaller for an NBA guard by NBA standards, he's still a good athlete. He tested well at the combine. And I think the hope is that, if you're going to take him in the top 5, you give him chances to be the lead point guard, to make plays and sort of tap into that more. So I think that's a guy who, particularly teams that are driven analytically, you look at the stats that he had at the age that he had in college, and it holds up very well. So I think there's upside there, and he's a very solid player already for his age. Stephon Castle, I think, is one of the best defenders in the draft. 6'7", played a big role in UConn's championship run this year. Can guard all over the perimeter, can guard guards, can guard wings, because of his size and athleticism laterally. So I think someone who's going to be a very good defender. I think that's going to help him find minutes early in his career. Offensively with Castle, there's room to grow. Played point guard in high school, has room to make strides, was more of a secondary playmaker in college. I think that may be sort of what his role is in the long term. Has room to improve as a three-point shooter. I think that's one of the areas of weakness that you'd say right now for him. But guys with his level of defensive talent are hard to find, and finding guys who can slow down some of the dominant wing scorers in the NBA is always hard to find. So I think he's a big upside swing in the top 5 of the draft, or if he's available later as well.
Can I ask you one more quick one? Okay, cool.
I can do quick, yeah.
Yeah, quick. So as far as the future goes for the Spurs, is there any, in your opinion, can they win now with what prospects are available, or is it going to be a developmental process?
Well, I think it's just a matter of what the timeline is that the front office has. I think Wembanyama is ready, I think, to get a team to the playoffs. It's just a matter of how long does it take to put the team around him that's in a way that manages the trade assets that they have and allows for their young guys to improve. What's the best way to do that, right? So whether it's this year or next year where they really start to get aggressive, I think it just depends on the market, right? Like, is there a star you can get or a veteran you can get to bring in to kind of accelerate that? I don't think, it's the type of situation where you push a button and you're suddenly the number one team in the West, but definitely a very exciting position to be in, to have a little runway here to kind of put the right parts in place.